This is Gadgets Top 321. In today's video, I'm going to take a look at my Pilot Prera with the cursive medium nib, or sometimes it's called the 1.0 Stub Nib. Now, this was the first Stub Nib pen that I ever owned. I owned a Pilot Prera already with a fine nib, and I knew I really liked this style of pen, and I had been shopping for a stub nib or an italic. Really, I was looking for an italic at the time, and I started doing some research and trying to decide, do I want a stub nib or an italic? Do I want something more fine or wider? And I came up with this one. This has one of the more narrow stub nibs that are available, like on a stock pen. It's not the most narrow. At the time that I bought this, Nemesign had the .6 and the .8 stub nibs. I'm not sure what's available, easily available in an affordable pen now, but I ended up going with this one, the 1.0, and I'm going to go ahead and do my writing sample first, and then I'll go over what I like about the pen and some of the characteristics of the pen. Now, this pen was in my list of favorite everyday carry pens, and I had a little trouble with it. In the middle of my writing sample, it just quit. So I haven't used this in a few days, and we'll see how this writing sample goes. I've got this inked up with Pilot Roshizuku Yamabudo, one of my favorite inks. I like to use this pen and ink combination for grading papers, so that's what's in store for this pen this upcoming week. Well, we're off to a good start. This is a very smooth stub nib. Let's see. Okay, and you see I'm writing decently small. This is a Leuchtturm bullet journal. The dot spacing, I think, is 5 millimeters. So this is about the right size for this width of a nib. There's a significant amount of difference in the width of the downstroke and the side strokes. Get a lot of line variation. And you see here my little squiggles. It's broad enough that, they tend to kind of run together. They're not as nice and neat as my extra fine Lamy up here, but I find that for writing, I'm able to write with a decent amount of legibility. Let's see, I've started doing reverse writing. That's not something I ever do in everyday practice. This is very dry and inconsistent. It's not gonna, but I believe, do you any good in any practical situation. Let's see. I've found that, well, now that I did that reverse writing, I've found that this is a pretty dry nib. And that is good for everyday writing. I found that this nib works really well on poor quality papers. This is my best pen for writing on poor quality paper, which is good because I use this pen for grading students' papers, and they just use loose leaf notebook papers. So that's a good thing. Now the bad thing is it's kind of inconsistent since it's such a dry writer. Some inks look better than others. Like my Colorverse Golden Record, I'm not crazy about it in this pen. With it being a drier writer, it comes out pretty pale and there's not a whole lot of shading. I find that it looks better in a medium nib instead of this one, a medium or even a fine nib. My Nemesign Singularity 0.6, I really like the way it looks in that nib. It comes out darker and you see more of the shading. Now, I think in darker inks, I don't mind them as much in this nib. Colorverse Interstellar Space, it's lighter than it is in a normal nib, but I'm still seeing a little bit more of the shading. Colorverse Jupiter Flyby, I thought that I hated this ink because the first time I used it was in this pen and it just really looked pale and yuck. But quite some time later, I tried it in my Lamy Studio Extra Fine and found out that I really liked that ink. So I'm learning in this fountain pen hobby that don't give up on a pen or an ink after a first try. Switch up all the variables and see if that improves. I don't like pale blue dot in this. Now my darker inks, I don't mind them as much. Let me show you. Paper plays a big part in this also. Here's Iroshizuku Yamabudo. It's more of a magenta color, and then in my Pilot E95S fine nib, it's more of a wine color. It's much darker. But on my Leuchtturm paper, even in this stub nib, it's a darker color. So the paper plays a role in what your ink's going to look like also. But I really like the Pilot Prera style pen. Now I know that it comes in non-demonstrator versions, but in this pen I like the demonstrator better. I wish I would have gotten a black. I've got a blue and a green. I wish I would have gotten one of these in a black, which just means that the two ends would be like a gray color. But this is a pen that I like the demonstrator version. A lot of people are not fond of this white inner liner, cap liner, but with the white branding, I don't mind it. I think it works okay. And I like that cap liner being there. It keeps the nib from drying out. And the cap liner is where the clip mechanism is, and the Pilot Prera is famous for that satisfying click to the cap. I like the shape of the clip as well. Let's see, it's a cartridge converter. Many people are not fond of the converter that this one uses. This is the Con 40, I believe. It doesn't have a very large ink capacity, but with how dry this nib writes, you don't go through ink that quickly. This converter will keep this pen writing for quite a while. I'm usually not a fan of really plain nibs, but this one is just well done. It's simple, but it looks good. In my limited experience, my fine and this stub nib on the Prera, both nibs are just well tuned and write really well. The only problem I've had with this pen is in that writing sample that I have on video. I don't know what may have caused that, if there can be bubbles in the ink or whatever that caused the ink to an interruption in the flow. But that's the only trouble I've had with this pen. I like to post my pens, and this posts pretty securely. That cap liner grips on there. Now it doesn't snap on like the Pilot Custom 74 does, but it stays on here pretty securely. Now, if you don't post it on there good enough, it will work loose. I've had it work loose as I was writing, and it's just because I didn't post it well enough. But this just really fits the size of my hand well. It's a small pen. People with larger hands, I've heard say that it's a little bit on the small side for them, but for most people, small to average size hands, this is just a really nice size pen. It's lightweight. I remember when I got this, I had gotten a TWSBI Mini first. Now the TWSBI Mini is made of a much thicker plastic, so it's got a little more weight to it, and it's a little bit broader. And I think it's got more metal in it because I have the AL version. And when I got this in the mail and unboxed it, I thought, oh, this feels really flimsy. But after using it, the plastic that it's made from feels like a decently robust plastic. Now, I don't throw it around. When I put it in my purse, I keep it in a pen case. And usually when I'm using this pen, I'm using the one with the fine nib as well, and I typically keep them in this 2-pen case. But I've been using this pen, I think I've maybe been using this, I should have looked this up, but I'll have it in the show notes. I think I've been using this about 3 years now, and I've used this quite a bit. This has been one of my favorites, and you know, the finish still looks well, the branding on it, the screen printing still looks good. I've been very happy with this pen. Let's see, is there anything else? One of the things I like about it is it's fully disassemblable. You can take the feed and the nib out really easy. You can take everything apart. Now I have ink can get up underneath this cap liner, and there are videos out there describing how to take the cap liner out, and I think Brian Goulet did one. I think it's his video that I watch, that I just take a pencil with an eraser and a rubber band on it and pull the cap liner out, get that ink out of there, and put it back together. I can't remember if it's this one or the fine nib. One of them I've had to take apart before, but overall, I've been very happy with this little pen. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.